Chetan looked out at his two daughters, Kambili and Yagazie, playing in the garden. He felt a deep sorrow in his heart. My daughters have been through a lot, he thought to himself. I will do whatever it takes to make them happy again. Chetan was not just any man in the village. He was one of the wealthiest. His riches were a legacy from his father, shared with his older sister, Wanneka. Wanneka, being the elder, had taken charge of the family business while Chetan was still too young. She managed everything, even after their father's death, running the business with a firm hand. When Chetan came of age, he inherited the grand family mansion, all the luxurious cars, and a share in the business. However, Wanneka held the majority stake and continued to run the business. Chetan had no experience or skills in managing the business, which created a rift between them. Their father's will left Wanneka feeling cheated. Despite her hard work and dedication, she believed that her inheritance was insufficient compared to what Chetan received. Their mother, a housewife all her life, tried to mediate the conflict, and eventually they reached a fragile peace. Living in the family mansion became unbearable for Wanneka, especially after Chetan married and started his own family. Although Wanneka had children, she never married and disliked Chetan's wife. She felt that Chetan's wife married her brother because of their wealth. Wanneka eventually built her own house, but it could never compare to the grandeur of the family mansion. Wanneka left the mansion, taking their mother and her children with her. Despite talking and visiting each other, something always kept Chetan and Wanneka from becoming closer as siblings. Chetan, on the other hand, lived peacefully with his wife. Chetan always invited his family for celebrations. His sister, Wanneka, their mother, and his nieces and nephews would come. But whenever they met, there was always trouble. This time, they were celebrating the news of Chetan's second child. He was so happy when his wife told him she was pregnant again. At dinner, everyone sat around the table. Wanneka, however, could not resist mocking Chetan's wife. So, you finally learned to hold a fork and knife. My brother did you a big favor picking you from the gutter, she said with a mocking smile. Chetan tried to stop his sister, but her strong personality and the age difference made it hard for him to confront her. Despite the constant fights between Chetan and Wanneka, his first daughter Yagazie loved her aunt Wanneka very much. She was too young and innocent to understand the fights. But after Kambili was born, Chetan's wife became very ill. At first, she refused to go to the hospital, thinking it was just pain from childbirth. On the day she passed away, doctors told Chetan and his family that it was too late. She had been poisoned, and the poison had reached her heart. Who could have done this to my wife? Chetan screamed in the hospital corridors, looking for answers. He swore that whoever did it would regret the day they were born. Kambili was only 3 months old, and Yagazie 4 years old when their mother passed away. Though they had helpers, they were their daddy's girls. Every night, Yagazie would cry for her mommy, and Chetan would try to calm her. She went to heaven, dear. She is watching over you now, he would say. It broke Chetan's heart to see his daughter longing for her mother, knowing that Kambili would never know her mother's love. Chetan didn't have a job. He often thought about learning the family business from Wanneka, but he kept putting it off. Every time they met, Wanneka would insist, "You need to learn the business so we can grow as a family and build more businesses." "I can't leave my children alone," Chetan would reply. "Chetan, you are a man and you have to work. Leave the children with the aunties. You will still see them after work. That's how we all do it," Wanneka would say. But no matter how much Wanneka and their mother tried to convince him, Chetan couldn't leave his daughters with the helpers. He felt his daughters needed their parents' care. So he stayed home and time passed. The children grew and Chetan remained a full-time father. He would bathe them, feed them and care for them. One Sunday afternoon, Kambili cried out, "Daddy, I want ice cream." "Dear, I will get you ice cream when we get to town," Chetan promised. Kambili was now 4 years old and Yagazie was 8. Their village was far from town, the only place with ice cream. But Kambili cried and threw herself on the ground screaming, "I want ice cream, Daddy." Chetan tried to calm her, but she didn't want to hear it. That day, Chetan drove for almost an hour to town. It was Sunday and most ice cream shops were closed. He finally found one open and was very happy. He knelt and gave the sobbing Kambili the ice cream. "Here is one for you, Yagazie," Chetan said. "No, I don't want ice cream. I want a teddy bear," Yagazie replied. Chetan rushed through the shops in town looking for a teddy bear. Chetan would pick one and Yagazie would cry, "No, not this one. I have this one already. This one is ugly." Finally, Chetan decided to buy almost all the teddy bears in the shop. After a long afternoon, they left for home. Neka and Chetan's relationship had improved over the years. Neka noticed how Yagazie and Kambili were becoming very spoiled. She tried to talk to her brother about it, but Chetan saw nothing wrong in providing everything his daughters needed. Neka also introduced some ladies to Chetan during their business functions, hoping he would remarry. After some years, Chetan met Nkem Dilim, a workaholic and loving woman who did consulting work for their business. Nkem and Chetan became very close. Whenever Chetan had a date with Nkem, he would bring Yagazie and Kambili along. At first, this bothered Nkem because she wanted to spend time alone with Chetan. Kambili would cry to go back home, or Yagazie would want to play with her father in the park. But over time, as Nkem grew close to the girls, she adjusted. Chetan saw how well Nkem bonded with his daughters and felt he shouldn't waste any time. He decided to marry her. By this time, Yagazie was 14 and Kambili was 10 years old. Nkem and Chetan got married and their families were very happy for them. Nkem settled into the mansion and started to feel at home. She began preparing meals and introducing new recipes for the maids to try. One day, as Nkem was about to write a recipe, she needed a pen but couldn't find one. She called out for Yagazie, who was in the living room, but there was no reply. Nkem walked closer to Yagazie and said, "Yagazie dear, I have been calling you. Can you please lend me a pen?" Yagazie, looking disturbed and glued to the television, replied, "Can't you see I am watching my favorite show? I am busy," and turned back to the television as if Nkem wasn't there. Nkem, not used to Yagazie's attitude, didn't know what to do or say. She then looked for Kambili. "Kambili, can you please quickly run to the talk shop to get a pen for me?" Nkem asked. "That's the maid's job, auntie. I don't run errands. We have people for that here," Kambili replied. Nkem, shocked by the children's behavior, didn't know what to do. She went upstairs to where Chetan was. "Darling, can you please talk to the girls for me?" Nkem said calmly, sitting close to Chetan. "I tried to ask Yagazie for a pen and asked Kambili to buy me a pen quickly, but they both refused." "All right, I will talk to them," Chetan said and went back to reading his newspaper. Nkem, though shocked at the girls' behavior, felt better when Chetan said he would talk to them. In the evening, Chetan called both girls to talk to them. He asked why they couldn't do what their stepmom wanted. Yagazie replied, "Dad, I was watching my favorite show. You know I can't miss it. It helps me with school projects." When Chetan looked at Kambili, she started sobbing. "I wish my mom was here. I wouldn't be running around the streets for a pen." Chetan and Yagazie began comforting Kambili, who was now wailing loudly. They took Kambili to her bedroom, and then Chetan came back, looking furious at Nkem. Seeing his anger, Nkem started talking before he could reach her. But what made Kambili cry over just a minor issue? This was just a small conversation to reprimand the girls, she said, trying to calm Chetan. "Nkem, you wouldn't understand. My girls are very sensitive. You can't just boss them around and change things here," Chetan said and stormed off to check on his daughters again, leaving Nkem standing there, not knowing what to do. After that day, Yagazie's disrespect for her stepmom Nkem grew. Whenever Nkem tried to tell Yagazie the right way to do things, Yagazie would retort that Nkem was not her mother. Nkem decided to talk to Chetana again. "Daddy," Nkem called, "I feel the girls need some discipline. We have to teach them manners so they don't become spoiled. Let's raise them well." "Nkem, my children are fine. Are you saying I didn't raise them well?" Chetana asked. "No, Daddy, I'm not saying that. It's okay to spoil them sometimes, but the girls don't know how to talk to or respect their elders or anyone else," Nkem said, her voice rising. Chetana still didn't understand Nkem, and these constant talks started to cause a rift between them. One day, Nkem hosted a dinner and invited one Neka and her mother-in-law, as Chetana used to do. It was a happy feast, and this time she separated the tables. The children had their own table, and the adults theirs. But as they were busy eating, Yagazie moved to the adults' table. "Yagazie dear, we are discussing some matters. Can you please go back to the other table?" her aunt, one Neka, said. "I am also an adult," Yagazie replied. "But your cousins, who are much older than you, are sitting back there. You can sit with them," Nkem added. "Who are you talking to? You are not my mother, and this is my father's house, not yours," Yagazie retorted. "The nerve," one Neka said, pushing her chair away and slapping Yagazie. "You spoiled girl. Is that how you talk to your mother?" One Neka's eyes flared with anger. By this time, everyone was standing. "Did you poison my mother so that you can hit me?" Yagazie cried, running upstairs. "Chetan," one Neka screamed, looking at her brother. "What? How dare you hit my child? Do I hit your kids? Have you ever seen me touching them? Everybody leave my house," Chetana shouted. "So you told them I poisoned their mother? Come back here, Chetana," one Neka shouted, watching her brother go upstairs. The kids stood looking at each other in shock. Nkem followed Chetana upstairs, leaving the guests to see themselves out. She found Chetana in Yagazie's bedroom, calming her down. "What is she doing here?" "Dad, she called them here so they could gang up on me." "This was her plan," Yagazie said, crying. "Yagazie dear, I'm sure your auntie was only reprimanding you. She just lost her temper because of your behavior," Nkem said. "Nkem, you are not helping. I think you should go," Chetana said, pointing to the door for Nkem to leave. Nkem left the room feeling like she was not part of the family. From that day on, she told herself she would never complain or reprimand the girls again and would let them have their way. As the girls grew into beautiful teenagers, problems in the house increased. Though Nkem promised herself not to interfere, they began to interfere more in her relationship with Chetana. Whenever Nkem planned to spend time with Chetana, one of the girls would suddenly become sick or find some other way to disrupt their plans. The situation worsened when Yagazie and her friends started disrespecting Nkem. When Nkem reprimanded them for making noise in the house, Yagazie would say, "She's trying so hard to take my mother's place, but she will never feel her spot in my father's heart." Nkem felt miserable and couldn't talk about how she felt. As Yagazie grew older, she began bringing boys home. This worried Nkem. Despite her resolve not to meddle, she would chase the boys away. Yagazie would then go and tell her father what Nkem had done. "I hear you chased Yagazie's friend today. Why would you do that?" Chetana asked Nkem. "Yes, I did. It's wrong for Yagazie to bring boys into the house," Nkem replied. "Says who?" Chetana asked. "You know what? I am tired of all of you making me feel like I don't belong here. Is this not my house too, Chetana?" Nkem asked angrily. "It's your house too, but why are you stopping the child from doing homework with her friends?" Chetana said. "Homework? Is that what she told you? I found her with a boy in her bedroom. There were no books there. Why didn't they do the homework in the study room?" Nkem asked. "She's lying, Dad. I was giving my friend a house tour. Nkem just hates us. Ever since she came into this house, there has been no peace," Yagazie said, crying. "Yagazie, stop lying. I will not have it today. No one must reprimand you because you are fragile and sensitive. Tell your father the truth now," Nkem said furiously. "Dad, have I ever lied to you?" Yagazie asked, looking at her father. "No, dear, you don't lie," Chetan said. Nkem looked at both of them and stormed off to her bedroom to pack her things. After a while, Chetan heard Nkem coming downstairs with her bags. He stood and asked, "Nkem, where are you going?" "It's obvious, isn't it? Until you realize that you have spoiled your children, you will never have a marriage," Nkem said, walking to the door. As she walked away, Chetan started begging, "Please don't go. You can't live like this. I will only stay if you allow me to be a mother to your daughters and discipline them. Look at them," she said, pointing at Yagazie and Kambili, who were smiling at her. "You think they must be treated like princesses because you are a single parent. When I speak, you say it's a stage and it will pass. Yagazie is now 18 years old but behaves like a child. You have to choose now, Chetan. Will I be able to live in this house like it's mine, or will you turn a blind eye to everything they do?" Nkem asked, but Chetan looked at his daughters, who pretended to be sad when he looked at them. When he looked away, they smiled and showed Nkem thumbs up. Nkem stood and waited, but Chetan couldn't decide. Nkem laughed scornfully. I knew it. I will send the divorce papers. And by the way, I am pregnant," she said and left. The girls ran upstairs to the lounge and started dancing happily. "Finally, we are free, Kambili," Yagazie shouted. Their father was downstairs, convincing himself that he made the right choice by letting Nkem go. A few months after Nkem left, they finalized their divorce and the girls were free to do anything they wanted, including commanding the house helpers to serve them. A few more years passed and Yagazie turned 21. On her birthday, she asked her father to buy her a car. "Dad, can you buy me this car?" she asked, showing him a magazine. "Yagazie, there are many cars in this house that you can use. Just take any," Chetan replied. "No, Dad. My friends at college would laugh at me for not having a convertible. I already told them I would come back with a new car. Besides, it's my 21st birthday. I need something special." Chetan looked at his daughter, who was begging and frowning, and he agreed. But before he could travel to the city to buy the car, Nwanneka visited. Although they still had many unresolved issues, Nwanneka was very professional when it came to business matters. She told Chetan that she had decided to retire from the business. She explained that the business had not been doing well for the past few years, and since Nkem left, they had been losing a lot of money. Investors were pulling out because Nwanneka would no longer be the CEO. She also told Chetan that she was selling her shares before the business collapsed and advised him to do the same. Chetan didn't understand much about the business, and he thought selling his shares would erase his family legacy. Starting a new business felt like a risky loss to him, so he kept his shares under new management. He didn't attend the shareholders meeting and instead went to the city to buy Yagazie her dream car. Yagazie was very happy showing off her car to her friends. Things started to change for Chetan when the time came to receive his dividends. He found that the money he got was very little, not even enough to cover their monthly expenses. Confused, he went to Nwanneka for advice. After he explained and showed her his bank papers, Nwanneka shook her head. "Chetan, the new management informed all shareholders that since the business was not making a profit, the dividends would be very little. You were supposed to attend the meetings or at least ask for the minutes," Nwanneka explained. "But what was so important that you would miss such an important meeting? You have all the free time in the world," Nwanneka asked. "I had traveled to the city to buy Yagazie's car for her 21st birthday," Chetan replied, his voice humble. "Oh, I can't comment on that, but I guess you chose what was more important to you," Nwanneka said, handing him back his papers. Before Chetan left Nwanneka's house, he apologized and told Nwanneka that they found the woman who poisoned his wife and the woman was an old friend of hers. Nwanneka didn't really care about that and she left Chetan standing, thinking hard, hoping that the business would revive and he would get more money next time. But things got worse. Chetan started selling some of the cars in the house to maintain their lifestyle. He decided to sell Yagazie's car as it was the latest and had the most value. He called Yagazie back home, but when she arrived, she was heavily pregnant. Chetan and Kambili looked at Yagazie shocked. "Yagazie, who is responsible for this?" Chetan asked, pointing at her belly. "Dad, I can't talk now. I am really tired and just drove for hours. Yagazie replied and went to her room, leaving her father standing still and Kambili clapping her hands. In the evening, Chetana waited for Yagazie to come downstairs, but she never did. Chetana went to her bedroom. Yagazie, I am still waiting for my answer. Whose child are you carrying? I thought I sent you to school to study, but you were busy with boys? Chetana said, Dad, why are you shouting? You never shout. Don't worry, I have everything under control. The dad is rich, just like me, Yagazie said, chewing her gum. Yagazie, I will have to sell your car. We have some financial troubles, Chetana said. Us? Money troubles? Never. Dad, don't touch my car, Yagazie replied, scolding at her father. Chetana felt helpless. He laid off most of the household employees except for one maid to help around. He sold most of the cars, leaving Yagazie's and only one for himself. When he went to pay for Yagazie's tuition fees, he realized that she had not passed and couldn't qualify to write her exams. Yet, he still had to pay the fees. He was worried because Kambili was also finishing high school, and Yagazie would have to repeat a year. Feeling weak and stranded, he went to his sister's house and explained everything. Chetana, you still kept your shares? One Neka asked. She told him she couldn't help him much financially as she had just invested in a new oil business. She offered to trade the family mansion for her house and give him the difference in cash. Chetana didn't understand much about it and felt he would get little money out of the mansion if he traded it for one Neka's house. So he put it on the market. Months went by without any promising offers. One Neka insisted that no one would buy a mansion in the village when there was a more developed town, but she was still willing to buy it. Chetana felt her offer was too little. Then a businessman came and promised to pay Chetana double. Chetana was very happy with the offer and thought his sister had been trying to cheat him, since people were willing to pay double for the mansion. The businessman who wanted Chetana's house was in a hurry. He always told Chetana that he wanted the house immediately and would pay all the costs in cash since he was very rich. Whenever Chetana talked about some cost or that the house would need maintenance, the man would tell him not to worry and that he had the money. He told Chetana that he would pay from the bank in the city and Chetana would have to meet him there with all the house papers. He also said there was no need for lawyers since he was paying cash and was in a hurry for his family to move in. Happy to finally get back on his feet and getting twice the value of the house, Chetana didn't think twice and traveled to the city to meet the buyer. They both entered the bank and sat on the chairs, but the man wanted to see the house papers first. Don't worry, I just want to see if you have the right papers, if this sale is legit, he said, laughing. People are not trustworthy these days. You can sign this as I look through the papers. This is so that you agree you are selling the house to me, the buyer said. You are right, sir. You can't trust people these days, Chetana said, signing the papers and handing them back to the man. I am coming. Let me just go to my banker to see if the money is ready. Wait here, I am coming, the man said. Chetana waited, smiling to himself. As time passed, Chetana started feeling hungry and realized it had been hours since the man had left. He tried calling the man, but the number didn't go through. Confused, he started looking around, running back and forth and asking the bank tellers where the man was. They tried to help him with the bank footage, but still couldn't find the man. When he went to the police station that night, they couldn't identify the man either. Chetana had to go home the next morning, unsure of what to do. He never told his sister that he was selling the house to someone, and he felt a bit calm since he still had his house. 3 weeks later, a different man came to the house with the house papers and the police to evict Chetana. Everything in the house was his, according to the papers and their agreement. Chetana, the maid, and Kambili were evicted that day. Chetana took the maid to her home and then went back to one Neka's house, telling her and their mother the whole story. Everyone was shocked, angry at the scammer, and feeling sorry for Chetana at the same time. I am almost 50. I have never worked a day in my life. One Neka, what will I do? Chetana said, crying, but his mother and sister consoled him. It's okay, Chetana. We can't lose our house just like that. They will not get away with this, I promise you, one Neka said, reassuring Chetana. Yagazie came back home and went to one Neka's house fuming. "Dad, this is very embarrassing. I went to our house and found out it's no longer our home. Why didn't you tell me?" Yagazie said, starting to compare her father's mansion to her aunt's house and belittling everyone. Kambili and Yagazie continued living comfortably as if nothing had changed. They would be served by maids and slap them if things didn't go their way. But Yagazie and Kambili started fighting with their aunt because of their behavior. One day, one Neka had enough and told them to move out if they wanted. They behaved for a week, but soon went back to their old ways. Yagazie gave birth to a baby girl. At this time, she was ordering her aunt's maids around and shouting at them just like she used to in her father's house. But her aunt eventually told her brother to find a small place for him and his kids, since he couldn't reprimand them. One Neka took Yagazie's car to sell it and also helped to sell Chetana's shares. With the money, Chetana rented a small 2-bedroom house. With no maids and living like any other normal person, Chetana was responsible for cooking and doing all the house chores in the house, as his daughters didn't know how to. One day, as one Neka came to bring groceries, she found her brother sweeping the yard. One Neka looked at Chetana from a distance. "Chetana, have you now turned into a houseman? Why can't Kambili help with the chores?" one Neka asked, getting inside the house where Kambili was watching her show, while Yagazie lay on the other couch next to her baby. "Even after all this downgrade, you girls can't change?" one Neka asked, and this time Chetana stopped sweeping and came into the living room. "What is it now, sister?" he asked. One Neka started pouring her heart out about the way Chetana had raised these girls. "Look at you now. You cook, wash, sweep, and clean for these girls while they watch lazy around. This one got pregnant by a scholarship first-year student who claimed to be rich but didn't even know his last name. And that one, we don't even know if she will go to college," one Neka said. She continued asking Chetana what would become of the girls if they remained spoiled and had no future. For the first time, Chetana realized the truth in what one Neka was saying. He just sat there looking at his children, not knowing what to do. He stayed quiet for the longest time until one Neka left. A week later, Kambili rushed to her aunt's house, crying and handing her a letter. The letter was from Chetana, who told everyone how much he had failed them and his daughters, how he was tired of life and was leaving so they could see life for what it is without him. He apologized for his sudden departure and told everyone not to look for him. And just like that, Chetana was gone, leaving his 2 girls and granddaughter to fend for themselves. One Neka seemed unbothered. She thanked Kambili for the letter, and as she turned to go inside the house, Kambili called out, "But auntie, we have no food in the house. Can you help with food?" "Oh no, dear. I only have enough for my family," one Neka said, closing her front door. Kambili left her aunt's house crying, walking a long distance back to where they were renting. Kambili got home late that night, empty-handed. Kambili and Yagazie looked at each other, cried and hugged, asking each other what they were going to do. For the first week, they made soft porridge from the small amount of maize meal left for breakfast, lunch, and supper. Yagazie's baby needed milk. At first, Yagazie was not breastfeeding, but she had no choice now, even though she needed to eat to feed the baby. Kambili, who was supposed to start her first year of college, knew that her dream of going to school was far-fetched. She tried going to her aunt to beg for help, but her aunt didn't even give her a chance. Their father had paid for 6 months' rent on the house, so Kambili came up with a plan to sell their expensive clothes. This worked, and everyone was interested in their clothes. But as soon as they got the money, they would hire a maid to clean and cook for them and buy useless things that wouldn't last for months. They kept doing this for 6 months and even mocked their aunt, saying,
"Who needs a rich aunt when we have expensive clothes?"
and laughed hysterically. After 6 months, reality hit them. The monthly rent was due. The landlord came and wanted his money, warning them he would evict them in the week. Before they knew it, another week passed, and the landlord came with new tenants. Kambili and Yagazie found themselves on the street that night. The next morning, Yagazie and Kambili hitchhiked to Yagazie's college, where she left the baby with the baby's father. Then she looked for her friends to ask for money. At first, Yagazie pretended to still be rich, not knowing everyone knew about her troubles. Nobody wanted to help her. They all reminded her of how she treated them and looked down on everyone. Yagazie left the college and asked Kambili if she knew anyone who could help them, but Kambili laughed.
I was just a high school student last year. Do you think any of my friends can help us?
That day too, they had no choice but to sleep in the streets. It was worse for them because they were now in the city. They started making plans under a bridge, thinking about what they could do next, since it wasn't safe for girls on the street. The next day, they walked around the city, asking for jobs door to door. It had been 2 nights on the streets, and they were now dirty. Some people looked at them in disgust and waved them away. Nobody wanted to employ them. The whole day went by with no job or food. They started asking for leftover food at restaurants. If they got turned away, they waited for customers to finish their meals and then searched for leftovers. Weeks went by. One day, as they lay covered in plastics and cardboards, they heard whistles. A group of street boys was coming towards them.
Who has taken our spots?
The boys said, removing the plastics and boxes Yagazie and Kambili used to cover themselves. They shook the girls, waking them up. When Yagazie and Kambili woke up, the boys realized they were girls. The boys started leaning closer to both Yagazie and Kambili, who were now shaking in fear. Yagazie held Kambili's hand, pulled her and shouted,
Run!
They ran, and the boys chased them. The girls ran for their lives and managed to lose the boys after a long run. Out of breath and sweating, they decided to walk the entire night.
Let's go back to our aunt. We have to. She will take us back in,
Yagazie said. The girls walked for days, sometimes using forest paths and sometimes hitchhiking from one town to another. When they reached their aunt's house, she couldn't recognize them.
Aunt, please help us. We miss our home,
they pleaded. Their aunt said she would ask her friend to help them find jobs, and that's all she could offer. The next day, she took them to a lady who sold fast food in town and left them there. The lady was called Njideka. She had a very busy fast food restaurant and always needed help. Yagazie and Kambili started working for Njideka. She sent them to start with the cleaning. Ladies, you will start with cleaning the toilets, mopping the floors, and washing the pots and plates. This place must always be spotless. Do you hear me? Njideka said sternly, and it was clear she meant it. Yagazie and Kambili, who had never cleaned in their whole lives, felt lost. They started with the toilets, taking their time and hesitating to do the work. Hurry up, girls, or else you will go back to the streets, Njideka shouted. Yagazie and Kambili cleaned the whole day. When they didn't do it properly, Njideka made them do it again. They sweated and felt faint from just cleaning a few toilets. That whole day, they only managed to clean the toilets until they were squeaky clean. Njideka managed her business by ordering her employees around and shouting at them, sometimes even firing them. Almost every day, she would fire or slap someone for not doing their job right. But with Yagazie and Kambili, she was very patient. At the end of the day, she gave them food and showed them a back room where they would sleep. The room was like a junkyard, in poor condition, with pieces of boxes showing signs of rats. Njideka stood at the door and ushered the girls in. This is where you will sleep, ladies, Njideka said.
You call this a room?
Yagazie said, frowning and looking disgusted.
This place looks hideous,
Kambili added. Oh, I am sorry, girls. Do you want me to book you a hotel, maybe? Njideka said, laughing at them. My friends, get inside or go back to the streets, she said, closing the door as she left. Yagazie and Kambili took some brooms and pushed some of the dirt aside to make room for them to sleep. They found old, thin blankets, smelled them and looked at each other, but they used them anyway. The following morning, while they were still asleep, Njideka banged on the door at 4 a.m. She brought them buckets and showed them a tap at the back of the room outside. There is a tap. You have to quickly wash before the other cooks arrive. This is where and how you will wash every time, Njideka said.
Oh wait, what time is it? I am very tired. My body is sore from working and sleeping on the floor,
Yagazie said.
Can you please let us rest for a while? We don't even have phones. We sold them to get money for food.
Kambili said, "Girls, I am not here to babysit you. If you can't walk, there is the door. Now go wash." Njideka said, looking annoyed. Yagazie and Kambili took their buckets and went to the tap. They struggled to push the buckets to a corner so they could wash. Njideka stood at the door, hands on her waist, quietly laughing at the scene. Both Yagazie and Kambili pushed the bucket from the tap that was not even half full. When they touched the water, they screamed that it was too cold. After washing, Njideka showed them the big pots they had to scrub before the cook arrived. She stood in the kitchen and watched them doing it terribly. "The slower you do it, the longer it will take. Don't think my business won't run today because of you. Make it snappy, girls," Njideka commanded, clapping her hands. After a week, the girls knew they had no other option. After a while, they were moved to peeling potatoes, butternuts, cabbages, and preparing the food. They got used to the work, cleaned up their back room, and started buying better blankets to sleep on. Their first pay was not much because they were given accommodation and food every day, but they managed to survive. As soon as they got used to the job, Njideka started treating them like any other employee. One day, Yagazie made a mistake with an order. A rich man snapped at her and threw his food on her. He was a regular customer who brought many friends to the restaurant. When Njideka heard the commotion, she ran towards the man to calm him down. He pointed at the foolish girl who gave him food he was allergic to. The foolish girl was Yagazie. Njideka slapped Yagazie hard and told her to go back to the kitchen to make the correct order. She apologized to the man, who was shouting that he would never come back for Njideka's food, but she managed to calm him down after much begging. When Njideka went back to the kitchen, she found Yagazie crying. "Are you still crying? Go clean the food from your shirt and serve other customers," Njideka said without any care or remorse. The business went on as usual. At the end of the day, the girls sat in their room and started talking about their dreams.
Life is so cruel, my sister. I wish I could go back in time,
Yagazie said, crying bitterly.
We have to work hard. I want to save money to go to college. I can't live like this. Don't you miss your child, sister? Our father, our home,
Kambili said, hugging her sister, and they both cried. Every day they worked hard, running around like headless chickens under Njideka's instructions and shouts. After 6 months, Yagazie and Kambili started to see a difference in their lives. They knew how to work and were now good at serving. Yagazie and Kambili were the only employees who stayed with Njideka for more than 6 months. But the conditions never changed. Sometimes they were asked to kneel to apologize to unreasonable customers. Kambili and Yagazie were looking for a way out. On their off days, they started looking for better jobs at professional restaurants. When Yagazie got a job at a restaurant, she told Njideka that she would be working for the last week. Njideka refused to let her go, saying their aunt left them under her care, so they needed her approval first. That weekend, Njideka sent Yagazie and Kambili home to their aunt. The girls went back home, and when they knocked, their aunt let them inside. When they walked into the living room, there was their father, Chetan, chatting with his mother.
Dad, where have you been? How come you are here?
The girls exclaimed, running to their father to hug him. They both knelt down and started crying.
Dad, we are sorry. We have been so unfair to everyone. You, Auntie, the maids, everyone,
Yagazie said, while Kambili nodded in agreement.
We have seen how hard life is out there and how we should appreciate the little things in life. We took you for granted, Dad. We have suffered so much,
Kambili added. All of them started crying.
Auntie, I am so sorry for everything. I wish Nkem was here too so I could apologize,
Yagazie said. They sat and began telling everyone how their employer treated them harshly.
Dad, Auntie, I can't work for that woman anymore. She is cruel. Please, Auntie, let me work elsewhere. I don't want to go back to that harsh woman anymore,
Yagazie pleaded. Am I cruel? Oh my gosh, how dare I? Njideka said, walking into the living room, laughing. The girls were shocked to see Njideka, but their aunt interrupted. There is no time to catch up now. We will catch up later. I want to show you something. They all drove to the family mansion. Nwaneka asked them to follow her inside the mansion. There was no one inside, and she handed the keys back to her brother. "Brother, welcome back home," Nwaneka said. Chetan, not believing his eyes, whispered,
"But how, Nwaneka? I thought I had lost it all."
Everyone sat down at the dining table, and Nwaneka explained how she planned everything. After the business went down, she realized her nieces would suffer if they didn't change. She hired the man who scammed Chetan out of his house. Everyone listened as Chetan sighed, relieved.
I thought you only planned my disappearance,
Chetan said. The girls looked at their dad, shocked.
What? So we are no longer going back to work? Oh, thank God. I will go back to school. I will study hard. I will take my daughter back. I will.
Yagazie started. Calm down, Yagazie, her aunt said. The girls knelt once more and thanked everyone, while their father thanked Nwaneka.
Sister, if it weren't for you, I wouldn't have realized how much I had ruined my children. I felt so sorry for them when they lost their mother. I couldn't say no to anything. I thought it would take away their pain. But now I have seen my mistakes. I lost Nkem and I miss her every day. I have to right my wrongs with her too. Thank you, sister,
Chetan said, his face looking down. Come on, everyone, let's be happy. Everything worked out right, didn't it? Nwaneka said, smiling. Yagazie, go get me some cold water, Njideka said. Yagazie ran to the kitchen and brought back a glass of water. Njideka drank it and said, Oh, silly girl, this water is too cold. Go get some lukewarm water. As Yagazie ran back to the kitchen, everyone laughed. You see, I trained them well. Come back here, silly girl, Njideka said, and they all laughed together. The end.